Hello, everyone. That piece of music is Country Gardens. It's traditional. The musician is Doug Creighton. The event was Doug Creighton playing for Marlborough Morris M practice. I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society. It's so nice to be back and so nice to have you all with us. On our team, we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media and our attendee questions. And monitoring on Zoom for questions and posting, we have Reed Wilson. We're back. And monitoring on Facebook Live chat for questions and posting, Larry Hansen. It's so nice to be back. We had a really nice summer break and we're ready to go again, but only on the monthly format. We invite you to post questions in the chat boxes on both platforms, Zoom and Facebook. And I think by now you probably all know where those are. And we will get to as many as possible. Come into the after talk. We'll be posting a link for that at the end of the show. And even if you're one of those people that can't stay up for the after talk, it gets a little too late, post your question anyways, because we usually get to all of them and you'll be able to find out later what our guest said. Thank you to Karen Axelrod and Jeff Spiro for that amazing In the Moment live from Los Angeles show. And it was nice to hear the new tune. So I won't say anything else about that. You'll have to listen, but we're proud. And to Houston Area Traditional Dance Society for providing a spot where if you weren't on Facebook and couldn't get to it, you can go there and watch it. Watch them all. We're going to post the link for that. I'm going to jump right into a bio about our guest, Steve Howe. He started dancing in high school, and along with his parents and siblings, he became involved with the Charlotte Country Dancers in his home of Charlotte, North Carolina. He dances with Marlborough Morris M and with Green Mountain Mummers and loves to dance Longsword. He also, and there's Atlas's debut. He also dances Contra and ECD, sings, and is married to clog and Morris dancer Meg Ryan. Continuing the family tradition, their 3 adult children are regular social and display dancers. It's the whole family. Yep, what a great tradition. Steve worked full-time for CDSS since 1989. He ended his tenure as director of camp programs this year in 2021, where he oversaw all the CDSS camp sessions. We are thrilled to finally be able to have Steve as our guest now that his busy schedule has opened up for a bit. He's been on the wish list for a while. Please welcome Steve Howe. Yay. Hi, Steve.
Hello.
Thank you for being with us.
So many of you, I assume, know me through my work at Pinewoods for the Country Dance and Song Society, but there are people in the dance community who know me mostly as a Morris dancer, or some as a sword dancer, and some just as one of Nancy Howe's many children. The tune that we opened with, Doug Creighton playing Country Gardens, for many years, the Marlborough Morris men, Marlborough Morris M, have started every practice and every dance with that same dance. Perhaps giving some indication on where I stand on the balance between tradition and innovation. But in many ways, I'm more interested right now and want to explore the tension between dancing it right and building community through dance. So how I started dancing. My parents, as Darlene said, yep, you want to show that first one? That'll be fine.
Thing number 1, he already said it, how I started dancing.
All right. So as Darlene said, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. My parents moved from the Chicago suburbs to Charlotte in 1955 with a 6-month-old me and my 4 older brothers. Over the next 6 years, son number 2 died, and there were another brother and 3 sisters were born. I never thought of my parents or my family as singers or dancers, but the favorite records were folk songs, and my mother did sing in the church choir. The first couple of dances that I really remember were, for my siblings and I aren't quite sure what the event was. Maybe it was my mother's 40th birthday or my parents' 10th anniversary, but I'm quite sure I was under 10 years old. But there was a square dance in the living room of the log house I grew up in, a caller and a small band. I remember mostly watching, but I know I was having a good time. My parents were recreating their dancing experiences of the post-war years when square dance was king. When I was in the 6th or 7th grade, there was a large square dance at the school, the K through 12 school, where my father was the headmaster. Big gym, stage set up at one end, live music, a caller. I suspect most of the dances were what we would now call a Kentucky running set formation, kind of a Beckett formation, Sicilian circle. Move on to the left, move on to the left. I had a blast, not unrelated probably to the fact that I kept finding myself meeting a female peer that I didn't already know and seemed very interesting, much to my adolescent surprise. These two events were primarily social parties. The dancing was a tool to bring us together. Some of my siblings remember my father talking about social dance as a good tool for educators. He firmly believed the theories that took square dance and maypole dance into schools, both for physical education and for socialization. I started dancing regularly, as Darlene said, when I was in high school with what became the Charlotte Country Dancers. One of my sisters had been to Orff in the Woods in Brasstown, beating the xylophones music class, but she came back talking about the dancing they had done. And pretty soon, Garnet Sloan was coming from Brasstown down to Charlotte for one weekend a month for a Friday and a Saturday evening of what we called English, Danish, and Appalachian dance. My older brothers were already out of the house, but the 6 of us remaining would always be there. We'd do the Black Nag, the Gay Gordon as a circle mixer, a Kentucky running set, the Salty Dog Rag, square dance here, square dance there. Sometimes Garnet would pass out yardsticks and we'd do a few figures of a longsword dance. It was an eclectic mix, dance to live music. We met at the university, UNC Charlotte. A professor of the phys ed department was very involved, got the space. There were some fine musicians who were willing to anchor the music with whoever showed up. This would have been 71, 72. And my parents, Nancy and David Howe, remain a strong part of the Charlotte Country Dancers, even beyond their deaths. For many years, 3 or 4 times a year, the dance, preceded by a potluck, was held at that same log house with the boys of the loft providing the music from the balcony. Here's a little bit of a video of one of those dances. When the Charlotte Country Dancers stopped regularly including English, there would still be a regular monthly gathering at my parents' house, sometimes with recorded music if no live music was available. It might just be 3 or 4 couples, but they would get some English country dance done. And many traveling dancer, caller, and musician has stayed at that log house that I grew up in. Yeah.
What an amazing place. All right, let's move on to thing number 2. How my work history led me to Pinewoods.
When I left Charlotte, I was in theater. I was a stage manager, and I got a job with a bus and truck theater company. And with that kind of work, time off was when the bus or the truck pulled into the rest area on the highway and they said, "You got 45 minutes to eat. Be back on the bus in 45 minutes. That's about the extent of time off. But I was on a track to work in regional theater as a stage manager, probably then as a production manager. And I got theater jobs when and where I could while I was based in New York. I worked a show in the Milwaukee Rep, and I did a show that was produced by the Hospital Workers Union that toured hospitals in New York City and in California, a couple of cities in California. One job would lead to another. But one of the jobs that led to sidetracked me from my career path. It was a day job, and it was with a private not-for-profit in New York City. I see Margaret Berry showed up at this thing. She worked with me in that situation. But it was a private not-for-profit taking traditional arts into the public school systems of New York City. And that's when I discovered 5 to 9, free time I could choose what to do with. And what did I choose? I chose dancing. I was familiar with it from my high school years, and I started going to the local dances, the Brooklyn contra dances, the dances in Manhattan. And I joined the local Morris team. I got involved a little bit with the Folk Arts Center. And of course, going to see some of the artists that were the people we were sending into the schools. That was also the time that in the early 80s, NIDAC, the New York Dance Activities Committee, was a committee of CDSS, whose offices were in the city at that time. And at that time, the Tuesday night dance was part English, part American. The weekend dances had shifted to be one or the other pretty much, but it was only the beginnings of real segregation between English and American as dance styles. I did both, but I was one of a long series of people who got into NIDAC because they only care about English. The committee needs a voice for contras. But it was a series of people because, of course, within 2 years, I was on the Playford Ball Committee, and I was one of them, and somebody else had to come in to be the voice of Contra on NIDAC. This was also the time that CDSS was was finding that its involvement with the local dance was impeding its ability to be a national organization. And it also at that same time was deciding to move out of New York up to Northampton, which was on one level was a drastic move to prove that it was a national organization and not solely concerned with the dances in New York. And in New York, we needed to form a local Sydney, Country Dance New York, a local affiliate that was not just a committee of CDSS. And we did, and I was the first president of that, and I was very much involved in that process. One of the things that helped that process, the church where we had the dances, we called it Duane Hall, later it was called Metropolitan Duane, and now it's called the Church in the Village. The dances had been there, I believe, since the 40s. But at that time, sometime in the early 80s, they said, no, you can't end the dance at 11. The door has to be locked by 11. And we tore our hairs out. It's gonna ruin the dance to have to end at 10:45. We're never gonna, people will abandon us left and right. What really happened when the dance ended at 11, after it was over, we'd cleaned up, locked up, a dozen of us would be on the street outside. What should we do? You want to go out somewhere? Well, how about here? How about there? Maybe, and 4 people, I'm going to go home. I got to get to work tomorrow, whatever. So 8 people would head all over to the corner bistro. And then we'd peek in the window. Is there room in the back? Is there a table big enough? Is it too noisy? Is it this? Is it that? And 4 people would say, I'm going to head on home. And 4 people would go into the corner bistro. When we ended the dance at 10:45, very quickly, we found that it's 20 people outside after the dance is over. And about that time, we found a place called the Chelsea Garden. It was a nice little diner type restaurant up on 7th Avenue, just north of 14th Street. And they had a big back room, lots of space. They were happy to give out separate checks. And within weeks, within a few months, there were 40, 50, 60 of us after every dance at the Chelsea Garden, having some dinner, some dessert, but talking with each other. And it really gave a real strength to the community when we got to know each other, not just as dancers on the dance floor, but as people with lives beyond that. So it was a very strong community that created Sydney, Country Dance New York. So at that point, I had my day job, and I was a very active social life centered on dance. But being a doer, I ended up with side jobs in production management at street fairs, festivals, many of them stemming from the dance community. I was involved with the New York Revels. I got involved with the Folk Art Center weekend festivals. I stage managed the dance stage at the Hudson River Revival for several years. And some of the jobs were stemming from my day job connections. I did a Labor Day street fair for that Hospital Workers Union for several years. And I worked for a street fair for the Boys Choir of Harlem. And all of that extra work built up to the point that I didn't have time for my day job. And the straw that broke the camel's back was when I had a chance to take a 6-week job in the summer for CDSS at Pinewoods in 1986. So for 2 more years, I was still based in New York and going to as many dances as I could and piecing together paying gigs, the best of which had the downside of competing with dance events. And then on January 1st of 89, I moved to Northampton to work full-time for CDSS, converging with Meg Ryan, who moved out from Boston. We were married by June. So I'm ready to go on to.
Yeah. Okay. I was just enjoying the story. All right. Thing number 3. What has kept me at Pinewoods in Long Pond for over 30 years?
So before that, what's the longest I'd had a job, a single job? Well, probably 4 years, but that one had been seasonal for the first 2. But I've been at Pinewoods for a while. As much as we all love Long Pond and the view from the Pinewoods dock and being at Pinewoods, it actually took me a while to get used to the sunrise on Long Pond. There's another side of Long Pond. In 1883, a New York banker, but Plymouth native, Howland Davis, married a Seabright, New Jersey socialite, Anna Shippen. But he insisted that their summers would be spent not on the thick of New York City society, but on the rustic fishing and hunting ponds of Plymouth. Anna agreed, but she claimed the right to create the atmosphere, and she filled the place with an air. A formal garden, an endless parade of guests. I believe there's a photograph coming of what the house looks like now. It's actually significantly smaller than it was in its heyday. And there's Long Pond there, but the view is not of the sunrise, but of the sunset. So it's an afternoon, the hot sun coming onto the dock in the afternoon is what I'm used to. Helen and Anna were known as Gar and Bampum to their many grandchildren. And by the time Helen Starrow was buying land on the west side of Long Pond, 4 of Gar and Bampum's children had summer places on the pond. If you're on the Pinewoods dock and look straight out and then a little bit to the left, you see windows. This is the dock of the boathouse and dock of windows. It's no longer in the family, but it was built by their son, William Shippen Davis. And a little bit further to the north, there's another picture coming. And to the right of this boathouse was where my grandmother built Mostly Piazza. And to the left of this boathouse, invisible up in the trees, is where my great aunt Udi, my great aunt Ruth Steinway, for whom Meg and I named Ruth, built Camp Stamp. It's now the year-round residence of Udi's grandson, Sam Chapin. Meg and I did not name Sam after this Sam. Oh, I meant to say too that in what's the Mostly Piazza, it is now occupied by a second cousin of mine who is also a PCI board member, Kate Harvey. Another daughter had married a second cousin with a place older than a shanty on the west side. My grandmother inherited the main house, a shanty, at her mother's death in 1945, and Udi's property expanded to include Mostly Piazza. So this is what you'd see from the pond of a shanty. The first time I remember going to Pinewoods was probably 1979 or 1980. I was at a shanty with family and a guest, and 6 of us paddled over one evening. We lurked outside in the woods outside of C Sharp. And when the Black Nag was called, we realized we had 6. So we made up a set and we danced along in the woods. I first attended a program in '83 when I went to American Dance Week as a camper. And the next 2 years, I was at American Week as the dining hall manager, and also went to E&A sometime in there. My longevity at this job with CDSS is not unrelated to the fact that it has made it possible for my children to summer on the pond where their great-grandmother spent virtually every summer of her life. They know third cousins. They love the area, not just for the Pinewoods magic that they share with many, but also the family magic also shared with many. Just 10 days ago, Sam and Bean, whom some of you will know as the office manager at Pinewoods a few years ago, were married at a shanty. Here they are cutting the wedding trifle. They were married on the Boathouse roof, and afterwards we had some waltzing right there. You see Crispin and Eleanor playing. They've been working with me in the office at Pinewoods for the last couple of years. A lovely, lovely event that moved us all greatly. Just a little group of 25 of us there for their wedding.
That must have been spectacular. Wow. All right, we're going to move on because I know this next one is the long one. Thing number 4, how I incorporate dance in my life over the last 40 years and why.
So I am fascinated by the tension between dancing for perfection, for artistic satisfaction and growth, and dancing as part of social interaction. And I look to English country dance and other social dance primarily as a community building tool. It's more important to get people involved and glad that they tried it than it is to do it right. And Meg and I started a family dance while we had little kids here in Northampton. It became a bit of a chore when the kids were less enthusiastic. Linda Henry took over that dance and ran it for many years. I hope it will resume after the post-pandemic. We do occasionally get to the contra dances in Greenfield, the English dances in Amherst. But with little kids, we actually weren't going to get a babysitter and both go. So we ended up mostly each going to our Morris practices and did not actually become regular dancers when we were parents of young kids. But we still dance from time to time and show up from time to time. And when the kids were in high school, it was a thrill when they started saying, hey, can you give me a ride to the Greenfield dance? There are a couple of specific events that Meg, the kids, and I host every year. You might not think of me as a singer, and I'm usually not much of one, but we have a caroling party every 23rd of December. We don't have a very big house, but we cram it full of people. And we all have a potluck dinner. And then at 6 o'clock, we gather in the kitchen and we run through a repertoire of about a dozen dances. I even set the pitch, but I'm happy when others improve upon that. Mostly I like to keep the tempo up. And friends from the Morris, friends from the community, friends from the contra dances. There's several music teachers in the crowd who often come, and just lots of food, lots of singing. And then we'll get our coats and boots back on again and go out into the streets and serenade some of the neighbors up and down the street. We've been doing that for 30 years and have a great time and are thrilled with the number of people who come to join us at that. Another thing that we host at the house it starts with the Morris team, what we call the home tour, but we gather the 3 or 4 teams and have a big brunch at our house, but then we head outside, do a few dances in front of our house. I've flyered the neighborhood to get neighbors to come along. And I end that hour leading a maypole dance, getting the neighbors involved with us. Couple of different shots from a couple of different years of the maypole dance. And then the Morris dancers all get in our cars and go on to the next stand and have our regular Morris day of dance. And of course, I would visit Charlotte, visit my mother, my parents, and then my mother in Charlotte. And anytime I got there, I would try to get to one of the dances. There was one Memorial Day, 2012. I woke up, as I do many a Memorial Day, at the Marlborough Morris Ale in Marlborough, Vermont. And at 9:45, I lead a maypole dance there. And then it's time to pack up, head home. I proceeded to the airport and on to Charlotte in time for the final dance at the log house. My mother was approaching 90, and it was time for her to give up the house and give up living alone. She was going to move in with my sister Sarah in Durham, and this was the last of the dances in the log house. At these dances, my father, and after his death, my mother, would start the dance by leading a snake dance. Most of the people would be from the dance community, but my parents always invited other friends, always hoping that some of them would become regular dancers. My mother asked me to lead the snake dance that night. So at the right time, with the eating winding down, I started in the kitchen, led the line out the back door to gather more people, came back into the house, headed into the living room, and I made the rookie mistake of not hugging the edge. And I quickly realized I was going to not fit everybody in. So I headed out the front door to the left in this picture, and it worked out really nicely because my mother was there on the front porch. So we all paraded past her. That's my mother and my sisters. We paraded past and out the door, down the driveway, and around to another door into the house on the other side, and came back into the house and back into the living room. But the people at the end of the line hadn't even left yet. You see people through the window that are on the driveway. This is the end of the line that hasn't left yet. And I'm trying to get back in with the whole beginning of the line. But this time I did stay to the edge and did a better job of making room for us all to fit in. And we got till there to pretty crowded. You see the band up in the balcony. And once we were all in there, a contra dance started in earnest with the caller standing on a stump by the fireplace, a different caller for every dance or every 2 or 3 dances, and the music coming from the balcony. I think my niece Alicia is actually singing a waltz for us in this picture. This is my sisters and a brother-in-law and me outside the dance at the end of the evening. I was watching that slideshow, so now I have to make sure I figure out where yes, I was then going to say, and here's a bit of a video from that last contra dance. You can see that fine dancing is not the primary concern. It's too crowded for that. But the community gave up their nice hall 3 times a year to go move all the furniture, roll up the rug, and crowd into this place because of the strength that gave the community. By those last years there a committee of dancers would arrive hours before, even some days before, to clear the driveway and rake leaves. And then 5 or 10 would arrive a couple of hours before. They knew exactly where each piece of furniture had to go to clear the living room and where the different serving dishes that would be used at the potluck lived. And they did all of that work. So my mother never had to lift a finger. That evening, the final waltz, people lined up to take a turn with my mother. From my parents, I learned the value of community first and to embrace the joy of dancing together without worrying about making a mistake. Here, this next photo is of a three-couple set that is just completely botched a dance. In our defense, we did form the set after the teaching, and we were at 90 degrees to the rest of the room, but luckily the six of us were happy to be there, even if we couldn't do it just right. I think this is a moment where we've just realized that, in fact, we are not where we're supposed to be at this point in the dance. But there's also a side of me that really does want to dance it right. And I look to the performance groups, the Morris and the Sword, to challenge me artistically and strive for that perfection. In the context of a performance team, I am comfortable telling a fellow dancer, you're doing it wrong. Do it this way instead. I'm not going to say that at a social dance. There's a gray line. There's always a huge gray line. I've never been on a team that kicked anybody off because they weren't good enough. But that didn't stop us from striving for a more cohesive look, along with the camaraderie. And it's also true that some of the strongest personal bonds I have had within the dance community have been the bonds within the teams. So I do understand the strength of a community that can come from a group that really strives for perfection together. So it's not one or the other. I know that things go both ways. In Morris, I first danced Morris and Longsword in New York City with the Greenwich Morris Men. As before digital photography, but somebody did scan this picture taken in Central Park in the early 80s or mid 80s. There was somebody else on the team who was about as tall as me, but not in this picture. You can usually find me by looking for the one who's a head taller than everybody else. In 89, when I moved to Northampton, I joined what was then the Marlborough Morris Men. And there's, through the years, a series of a lot of continuity, a lot of the same people year after year. You've seen, there's Brad in the front row. Kid, different period, different moments, different kids show up. This is the one where I want to say, in part of what the cohesiveness of this group is in this picture, Lucius, Rhett, me, Brad, David, Daniel, Aaron, Ted's not in this picture. Those names, we were the fathers of 18 children in an 11-year span. So our kids were all growing up together, and we were in that same part of our own lives that really kept us strong. The other thing about this picture, 2001, seated second from the left, is Christopher Carstanian, who was in one of the airplanes on September 11th. So this is the last team picture, including him. And then but we started picking up new dancers. You see some younger faces as we get a little bit more recent, and some of us old folks start dropping off. By 2020, which I think is probably the next one. Nope. Yeah, there's some younger faces. Sam, Matthew Duvenet, Greg Skidmore. And here by 2020, we dropped the EN from our name and from our identity. So we're now the Marlborough Morris M. And it's been a great joy to dance with a new generation of dancers. Sometimes I feel like the mommy duck in this crowd. There's, here we are dancing in Florence, Massachusetts, part of Northampton, just on May Day, doing the dance, did a maypole dance as well. I could still get some airtime in 2018. And this picture, one of the things I really like about this moment in our team, this is about 7 years ago. So there's me in the far left at 60, across from me, 50. Far right is 40 years old, across from him, 30 years old, and the two in the middle are 20 years old. And I've really, really enjoyed dancing, and if I say so myself, dancing well with that span of ages. It's been a whole lot of fun. And of course, my youngest, Sam, has been one of those, which has been a great joy. Longsword is the other thing I've done. My first serious longsword was with the Greenwich Morris Men in New York, Revels. And then when I moved here to Massachusetts in '89, I co-founded That Long Tall Sword, now defunct, but has been a great joy to me. We went to many a Half Moon Sword Ale in New York with our one dance and our mummers play. We tried to do just as well as we could. Our trick was that even though we only had one dance, we could do it for 5 dancers, for 6 dancers, or for 7 dancers. And we all knew all of the positions. So no matter what portion of the team could show up, we could put on our show. At an early height, we once performed without even knowing what role we were going to perform until moments before our entrance. We shuffled a deck of construction paper cards of colors and held up that, and the first color, that person took the room costume and entered and started to play, and then would hold up the next color moments before the next character had to enter. You'll see what I mean about colors. And of course, with that one too, we are dancing with obstructed vision. Here we are at the Sword Ale in 2014 with a 7-person version of just the dance, not the play. For the sword dancers among you, what we're particularly proud of in that figure is that we did not lose a beat when we changed what sword we were going over and over and over and over, even when the sword shifted to a different sword. I was recruited to join the Green Mountain Mummers in the mid-90s. At that point, I was the first change in the dancing set in 20 years. There have been more changes since, and now I'm moving up in seniority. We're on hiatus now due to COVID, but I expect we'll be back in 22. We really try to balance dancing with the full seriousness and precision in this comical play. And the dancing with precision is made difficult, not only by the cold, damp weather and the uneven ground of Putney, Vermont, but also by the fools. Oh, there's another dance that I love to perform and I'm often associated with, and I love to play with it, and that's the Abbott's Bromley Antler dance. Here's Lindsay, cut this one off as soon as you see us show up in the background. It's too long otherwise, I think. This is done in the way it's usually done at Pinewoods. This is with 2 different teams, the Greenwich Morris Men and That Long Tall Sword. at the 2006 Half Moon Sword Ale. Jerry Epstein of Greenwich, the late Jerry Epstein, and Cindy Naughton of Long Tall are playing. There have been a few times with that dance that I've played with having two different teams do it, two different groups do it. I also had the great pleasure of going to Abbott's Bromley on their day of dance. I think that was 2018, and had a chance, was one of the many who they gave a chance to hold the antlers and take a few steps with their antlers. They would arrive at a resting place, and then they would let others pick up the antlers, and they would do a bit. There's a picture, I believe, of, yeah. So I'm in the blue there. Rhett Krause, I was traveling with, is in front of me. You see the boy archer way over there on the right. And they dance from one place to another and then put the antlers down and then invite the host and a few other people to join in. A few of the dancers do a turn with them. And then in a bit, the team picks up and moves on to the next. It's a very different way of doing the dance. It's their dance. They get the antlers out of the church at 9 o'clock in the morning. They dance all day long, and stopping at bars, stopping at farms, and then get them back to the church in the evening. It was a lot of fun to see that and walk with them and see them from place to place. I really love playing with the different possibilities. I really get the mystery and magic of the haunting evening version, but I also see it as street theater and as an improvisation opportunity. I don't subscribe to any notion that there is a right way to do this dance, a right tune, a right tempo, a right setting, or even a right casting. It's notated as 6 antlers and 4 characters: the man, woman, the hobby horse, the boy archer, the fool. But I'm happy to include any mummers type character. Mostly those characters are contrasts: the man, woman, the horse person, the child adult, the wise fool. A large part of those characters is that they're contradictions, and there's a contradiction in each of us. And there's an unwarranted confinement to each label. For Northampton Night Out in December of 2019, I put together, there were 25 dancers and a band that included a sousaphone. Jillian Stewart and I had some conversation in advance about different ways to join our 2 sets, sometimes side by side, sometimes in a long line, and how might we shift from one to the other. And we had about 20 minutes to suit up and practice in the parking garage, and then we hit the streets. Even have So there we've done the whole big long lines going back and forth. And the other thing that this video in a second will show is just the improvisation of it. So we're headed off. And at this point, Jillian, at the head of the second group, decides to head off to the other direction. And then the last 2 characters say, whoops, that's my team over there, and just turn to follow there. This was early December event in Northampton where they closed the whole street, and it's a wonderful party. And the other thing about that venue, unlike at Pinewoods or a Revel stage, we could take as much space as we needed to make a huge circle. It might involve urging some people to move a little bit this way or a little bit that way, but there were no constraints of trees and roots and stumps and building edges or stage edges. I really hope that post-pandemic, we'll be able to go back to this Northampton Night Out and maybe even expand, get a third set in there and a bigger band. That sousaphone was really crucial when we got separated into two groups, but still wanted to be on the same beat. We could hear the sousaphone across the street. At the opposite end of 25 people, I did make a pandemic version to submit to the 2020 Half Moon Sword Ale. It's a dance to have fun with. I think that's it's wonderful theater, and I like it a lot. It's dead simple to do. I normally at camp I will tag people, a third of whom have never done it before, and we'll have 10 minutes, 15 minutes of rehearsal, and then we'll do it. So I think yeah.
Great. Yeah. Wow. How fun. you select people from camp. I'm going to go to camp more often. All right. Thing number 5. What I hope ECD and CDSS type camps, Pinewoods and others can offer and promote.
So I want us all to always think about the balance between the innovation that keeps the current population engaged and the accessibility of the form and content that attracted us in the first place and made us care. Are the innovations that reinvigorate the interest of the 10, 15, 30-year dancer a barrier to the entry of the 2020 version of that same person? Similarly at camp, any new amenity that makes camp easier on our aging bodies has an effect on the affordability and the sense of adventure that first attracted and let us start going to camp. Each improvement that makes it more physically accessible does impact the financial accessibility as well. And discussing that balance and making decisions with open eyes is really what I want to make sure that people do. And it's not just the comfort level. I mean, I know that one of the things I cherish about going to camp is that it's dark at night. There's a lot of people who wish there was more light, that they're having trouble getting around from place to place. 30 years ago, I never wore shoes and I never carried a flashlight. And I could look up and see the sky between the trees and know that I was on the path. And that's part of what I loved about being there. And so I'm reluctant to say, let's put in a light, put in a beacon that will help guide me to here or there. I'll get out my flashlight if I have to, and I do have to now, and I wear my shoes now. But I'll get out my flashlight and let's let the 30-year-old, the 20-year-old really enjoy the darkness and keep coming for 30 years because of that. So programmatically, I most appreciate the teachers as opposed to the callers, musicians. I mean, they are callers and they are musicians, but it's their teaching capacity that make them really important at camp. For me, part of the whole notion of these social dances, these folk arts, is that they're bottom up. They're the art of the people, that many of us could call a dance or play for a dance, could lead a song. We don't need a pro to guide us. We can go to a club and do some popular culture music or dance thing if we need the pro to guide us. But in this context, it's our art. It's what we do. Now, we can all improve. So let's go to camp to get more skills. And I hope that each teacher at camp has a conviction of their point of view, that they have an agenda that they want to convince us of. As students, our job is to try on that point of view for the duration of the class. We can decide later if it resonates, if we to what degree we want to incorporate it into our worldview, our dance style, etc. But let that teacher try to convince us of their point of view. When I was in my 20s, I was at an undergraduate theater program, the National Theater Institute at the O'Neill Center in Connecticut. And we all thought we were actors, college age, going to be the next stars. And we were bombarded by acting teachers, the method actor, the presentational actor, the commedia dell'arte actor, the Japanese no actor. Each of them was convinced and tried to convince us that their way was the best way, the only real way. And as students, we tried to understand and to really try it on. And then our reaction, or what we assimilated, how we adapted it, that's what made us the actors that we became, or in my case, the backstage production manager that we became. But let that teacher try to convince you. A music teacher goes to an Orff course or a Kodai course or takes a workshop from the Amidons. Those teachers have a firm belief in their system and their way of doing it. The teacher who is a student at this course can take the pieces of it, see what resonates with them, take what resonates with them, and take it home, take it to their classroom, and be a better teacher with another tool in their box. They don't have to do it exactly Orff all the way, but that Orff teacher gave them another tool. So I want the programs to supply the tools for us each to go home and better support our local dance music communities, whether it's as callers or as musicians, as organizers or as dancers, leaders from the floor, good examples of dance style and of community comportment.
Wow.
But that's what I look for.
That was great, Steve. Thank you so much. We'll be sending you the chat later on tonight, and you'll be able to read all the comments and how much people appreciated what you had to say. All right, well, we have to ask you, what's your favorite dance?
Well, when we talked about this before, I remembered that I have been, besides Longsword, that's a very broad, but Longsword is important to me. But an English country dance, which is what you are more interested in, I've been going back in my mind to Up with Eiley. And it's not a difficult dance, but it's one of the dances where it's so much more satisfying if we all get the timing right. Some of that timing is not rushing. And I think in New York, back in the 80s, of Ed Helwig, who hardly moved at that point, but was always in the right place at the right time. And that dance is a great one for doing that.
That sounds great. Thank you. And oh, I should ask, are you a tea drinker? Because some people will say, hey, you didn't ask.
Sure, I'm a tea drinker. Not the tea drinker my wife is, but I am a tea drinker.
Okay. Well,
and
Steve,
I generally drink an English breakfast, but I learned to drink tea with my great aunt Udi in the afternoons on Long Pond, and that was always lapsang souchong with a touch of lemon.
Oh, wow. Well, that sounds great. And isn't it, always the best way to drink it? Just the way you had it first. Yeah, right. That's so great. Thank you so much for being on our program. And you all need to come into the after talk because it's going to be great, as you can tell. I want to thank our guest, Steve Howe, and our 5 Things team, Lindsay Verbal in the background, Reed Wilson on Zoom, Larry Hansen on Facebook, along with our helpers, Kara King and Dan Bilter. We are back. We're so happy to be back, and we were so thrilled to open up again with you. It's so great. You all can watch our past 5 Things chats. You can find a link to all our web chats since we began in March 2020 at the Historical Tea and Dance Society website or on the CDSS website. Wow. So they're there. Web chats are also available on Facebook, on our main page, and on our YouTube channel. The after talks aren't made publicly available, but if you write in and request them, yes, you can get a copy of them to see, because we know it gets late for some of you. Yeah, thank you so much. And we have brought back our 5 Things fundraiser pin. So we have more now. There are 2 ways to receive one, or actually there's 3 ways to receive one, being a guest on this show. So you'll be getting yours in the mail, Steve. And we're posting the information for them. The After Talk link is being posted now. And we have a Dropbox link, which will have the chat for those of you who are still struggling with getting a hold of the chat and saving it, because I know some of you want to do that. Our next show is going to be Tuesday, November 16th, and we will be announcing our guests soon, secret, and registration will open when we announce that guest. We are still doing our weekly tea time on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. It's a social hour. You can join in, and Reed and Larry and Liza and all the rest are carrying the torch of that, and it's still a lot of fun. Feel free to post your other events now. I'm sure there's in the chat, I'm sure there's lots of things to post about. Donations. Steve recommends you donate to your local dance group. It doesn't have to be money. It could be your time and energy, or an organization that supports your local dance group, Country Dance and Song Society. We are posting the link, and we are going out with Steve's favorite piece of music, one of his favorite dances, and we will see you all in 2 minutes in the after talk. Bye.